I don't want to hear another word from you, Patterson, Spencer Caldwell barked, his face red and vibrating with family protection rage. Ashley is more qualified than you'll ever be. The words didn't just echo in that sterile HR conference room, they detonated like a depth charge in my 24-year career. I'm Wesley Patterson, 49 years old, and I just watched my life's work get handed to a 31-year-old who couldn't tell the difference between federal compliance architecture and a coffee shop loyalty program. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Spencer was leaning back in his executive chair like he'd just solved world hunger instead of committing what I knew was federal contract fraud. His niece Ashley sat beside him, that rehearsed corporate smile plastered across her face, the kind that says I've been waiting for this moment since Daddy bought me my first LinkedIn premium account. Effective immediately, Spencer continued, shuffling through a folder thick enough to choke a horse. You're terminated for failure to demonstrate company loyalty and refusal to collaborate with leadership initiatives. Leadership initiatives. That's what they were calling theft now. See, I'd been building federal compliance systems for 24 years. Started right out of the Navy, where I learned that when you're dealing with classified protocols and government contracts, documentation isn't just important, it's everything. Every line of code, every system architecture, every process flow gets logged, time-stamped, and tracked like nuclear material. I joined the Navy straight out of high school at 17, served 8 years learning systems engineering and federal protocols. After discharge at 25, I transitioned into federal contracting, where I'd spent the last 24 years building my expertise. The math was simple. Military discipline plus federal experience equals the kind of systematic thinking that keeps government contractors out of trouble. Which is exactly what I'd done with the adaptive federal multi-tier compliance architecture. Catchy name, right? I'd spent 4 years developing this system from scratch, working nights and weekends to perfect every component. It was designed to help government contractors navigate the maze of federal regulations without triggering audit flags or compliance violations. The kind of system that could save companies millions in fines and keep their security clearances intact. But Ashley had been sniffing around my work for months, always showing up to my brainstorming sessions, asking oddly specific questions, offering to help document my processes. I should have seen it coming when she started attending every meeting with her phone positioned just right to catch the whiteboards. Ashley Caldwell was Preston Caldwell's daughter, the CEO's kid who got her MBA from Daddy's alma mater and thought 2 years of experience qualified her to run federal strategy. Spencer, her uncle, and our 15-year HR veteran had been grooming her for a leadership role since she walked through the door. Family business, family rules. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago. I was working late, running diagnostics on the compliance framework, when I caught her in my secure workspace. Not just browsing, actively copying encrypted files from my development server, files that required level 3 security clearance to access. "What are you doing in here, Ashley?" I asked, keeping my voice calm but firm. She spun around, USB drive still plugged into my workstation. "Oh, Uncle Spencer asked me to familiarize myself with all departmental projects. You know, cross-training initiative." Cross-training, right. Like teaching someone to fly by handing them the keys to an F-18. I documented everything that night. Screenshots of the file access logs, timestamps showing unauthorized entry, server records proving she'd copied classified development materials. 24 years of military and federal training had taught me one thing. When someone violates security protocols, you don't confront them, you document them. Then I made what Spencer would later call my disloyal mistake. I filed a formal complaint through proper channels, reporting unauthorized access to classified development materials by an employee without proper clearance. That's when the family circled the wagons. Spencer called me into his office the next morning. "Wesley, I'm concerned about this complaint you filed against Ashley. She's transitioning into a leadership role and she needs access to understand our systems. She doesn't have level 3 clearance for those files," I replied. "Federal contractors can lose their certifications for unauthorized access to classified materials." His expression hardened. "Your refusal to support Ashley's transition shows a concerning lack of team spirit. We need team players, not territorial employees who can't adapt to organizational growth." Territorial. I'd been protecting federal compliance protocols that took me 4 years to perfect, and they called it territorial. Over the next 2 weeks, the pressure campaign intensified. Spencer sent emails about collaboration expectations and supporting family leadership initiatives. Ashley started attending more of my meetings, always with that phone ready to capture whatever I put on the whiteboard. The final straw came when I discovered she'd forwarded copies of my encrypted compliance algorithms to her personal Gmail account. Not just company policy violations, federal crimes involving classified contractor materials. I documented that too. Email headers, forwarding trails, timestamps proving she'd sent classified federal compliance data to unsecured external accounts. In the government contracting world, that wasn't just corporate misconduct. It was the kind of security breach that triggers federal investigations. But here's the thing Spencer didn't know, couldn't know, because he was too busy playing family politics to pay attention to actual business operations. 6 weeks before this circus performance in his conference room, I'd quietly filed a patent application with the USPTO, patent number 11,239-147, Systems and Methods for Adaptive Federal Multi-Tier Compliance Architecture. I didn't tell anyone because I'd learned something in the Navy. When you're dealing with people who think rules don't apply to them, you don't telegraph your moves. You document everything, prepare your evidence, and wait for them to hang themselves with their own rope. 24 years of federal service had taught me that family connections don't trump federal law. Spencer was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Spencer handed me a termination packet with the satisfied expression of a man who thought he'd just solved a problem instead of creating a federal case. Security will escort you out. Your access cards have been deactivated. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and walked out without saying a word. Not because I was defeated, because I was already 6 moves ahead. 24 years of federal service had taught me that the person with the best documentation wins, and I had documentation that would make Spencer's family connections look like toilet paper in a hurricane. That night, I sat in my den with a beer and my laptop, pulling together 4 years of meticulous records. Every email thread, every development log, every clearance verification. I had copies of everything because that's what 24 years in federal contracting teaches you. Redundancy isn't paranoia, it's survival. I opened my secure cloud account and started building what would become Spencer's nightmare. First, the patent confirmation from the USPTO. Filed, reviewed, approved, stamped with the kind of federal authority that doesn't care about family politics. Under inventor, it read Wesley J. Patterson in bold, uncompromising text. Filing date, 6 weeks before my termination. Patent classification, federal systems architecture with government contractor applications. The timeline was perfect. I'd filed the patent application during lunch break on a Tuesday, using my personal laptop and my own money for the filing fees. No company resources, no company time, no company claims. Just me, my 24 years of expertise, and 4 years of nights and weekends building something revolutionary. Next came the access logs from our development servers. Every time Ashley had accessed my secure workspace, every file she'd copied, every timestamp proving unauthorized access to classified materials. The logs showed her IP address, her user credentials, even the duration of each unauthorized session. Digital breadcrumbs leading straight to federal contract violations. The smoking gun was buried in my iPad's auto-sync folder. A photo I didn't remember taking. Actually, a photo Ashley had taken with her phone while I was explaining the compliance architecture on a whiteboard. The metadata showed she'd captured my proprietary federal systems flowchart 2 weeks before I'd finished the formal documentation. She'd literally photographed classified federal contractor materials without authorization. But the real jackpot came from the email forensics. Ashley had forwarded detailed notes about my compliance system to her personal Gmail account, complete with classified methodology and proprietary algorithms. She'd also sent development files to external consultants for review. Consultants without security clearances reviewing classified federal contractor materials. In the government contracting world, that wasn't just corporate theft. That was federal crime territory, the kind that triggers mandatory investigations and destroys security clearances permanently. Spencer had made everything worse by documenting his own cover-up attempts. Email chains showing him instructing Ashley to scrub Patterson's name from all documentation and ensure you're listed as lead developer on federal submissions. He'd created a paper trail of intentional fraud like he was writing a confession letter to federal prosecutors. I leaned back and cracked open another beer. They hadn't just stolen my work. They'd violated about 12 different federal security protocols and documented every step of the process. In the Navy, we had a saying, "The enemy's stupidity is your tactical advantage. Time to call in federal reinforcements." The Federal Contract Investigation Unit operates a 24-hour hotline for exactly this kind of situation. IP theft involving classified government systems triggers automatic federal oversight, especially when security clearances and contractor certifications are involved. I dialed the number at 9 p.m. on a Thursday night and got connected to investigator Patricia Reeves. Her voice carried the crisp authority of someone who'd seen every type of contractor fraud imaginable and had zero patience for corporate politics. Federal Investigation Unit, this is Investigator Reeves. Ma'am, this is Wesley Patterson. I'm reporting theft of classified federal compliance intellectual property by Caldwell Federal Systems, involving unauthorized access to secured development materials and violation of contractor security protocols. A pause while she pulled up a case file template. Mr. Patterson, can you provide documentation of the alleged intellectual property theft? Yes, ma'am. USPTO Patent 11,239,847 filed 6 weeks before my termination, plus server access logs showing unauthorized entry, email trails proving intent to steal classified materials, and evidence of forwarding secured federal contractor data to unauthorized external parties. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear keyboard clicking as she took notes. Mr. Patterson, are you telling me that a federal contractor is presenting stolen classified systems as their own proprietary innovation? Yes, ma'am. Caldwell Federal Systems has a federal compliance audit scheduled for next week. They're planning to present my patented system as their own development to government investigators. The keyboard clicking stopped. Mr. Patterson, if what you're describing is accurate, we're looking at federal contract fraud, theft of classified intellectual property, and violation of government contractor security regulations. Those aren't corporate HR issues. Those are federal crimes with mandatory prosecution requirements. I understand, ma'am. I'm prepared to provide full documentation and cooperate with any federal investigation. Good. Because if your claims check out, we're not talking about a corporate dispute. We're talking about federal charges, mandatory fines, and immediate suspension of contractor certifications. She scheduled an initial evidence review for the next morning. Federal agencies don't mess around when security clearances and classified materials are involved. While corporate HR departments might take weeks to investigate employee complaints, federal investigators work in hours when national security protocols are breached. I spent the rest of that night organizing 4 years of documentation into a presentation that would make Spencer's termination packet look like a grocery list. Patent documents, security logs, email forensics, clearance violations, unauthorized access records, everything time-stamped, verified, and backed up in triplicate. Admiral Brooks, my former Navy commander who now worked federal contractor oversight, had taught me something 20 years ago that I'd never forgotten. In government work, documentation isn't just evidence, it's ammunition. And the side with the most accurate ammunition wins every engagement. Spencer thought he'd fired a disloyal employee who was blocking his niece's career advancement. He had no idea he'd just created a federal witness with bulletproof evidence and nothing left to lose. By morning, Caldwell Federal Systems would be facing the full weight of federal law enforcement, armed with 24 years of my expertise and 4 years of their documented violations. The investigation was about to begin, and I had front row seats to watch a family dynasty collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. The federal investigation moved faster than I expected. Within 48 hours of my initial call, investigator Patricia Reeves had subpoenaed Caldwell's servers, reviewed my patent documentation, and interviewed 3 former colleagues who confirmed my role as the original architect. Federal agencies don't operate on corporate timelines when classified materials are involved. While Spencer was probably still celebrating his problem employee termination, federal investigators were already building a case that would destroy his family's business empire. The first breakthrough came from their own email servers. Ashley had created a digital confession spanning 6 months of systematic theft. Messages to her personal account detailing my compliance methodologies, forwarded development files to unauthorized consultants, even screenshots of classified federal contractor protocols sent to her MBA study group for case study analysis. In the government contracting world, sharing classified materials with unauthorized parties doesn't just violate company policy. It's a federal crime that automatically triggers security clearance revocation and permanent blacklisting from all government work. But Spencer had made everything exponentially worse by creating an email trail of the cover-up. Messages to Ashley saying things like, "Make sure any federal documentation shows you as lead developer, and we need Patterson's name scrubbed from all government submissions before the audit." Federal investigators don't just prosecute the original crime, they add conspiracy charges when there's documented evidence of intentional cover-ups. Spencer had essentially written a how-to manual for federal contract fraud and sent it through company email servers. 3 days after getting fired, I was sitting in my kitchen eating leftover Chinese takeout when my phone buzzed with an email that would change everything. Subject line, "You didn't see this from me." The sender was Rodriguez, my former Navy buddy who'd stayed at Caldwell as a project coordinator. Rodriguez had always been solid, the kind of guy who'd take a bullet for his shipmates and never forget a favor. When he heard about my termination, he'd started paying closer attention to the company's federal compliance preparations. Attached to his email was a PowerPoint file. Federal Audit Presentation Final V8.pptx. I opened it and felt my blood pressure spike, not from shock, but from pure vindication. Slide 1. Adaptive Federal Compliance Framework. Innovation in Government Contracting. My system, my architecture, my 4 years of nights and weekends, now branded as Caldwell Family Innovation. Slide 2 featured a diagram showing the multi-tier compliance structure I'd designed. I recognized it immediately because there was a small formatting error in the bottom left corner, a vector graphic glitch I'd always meant to fix but never got around to. The kind of microscopic flaw only the original creator would notice, like a birthmark on your own child. Slide 3 contained the mathematical flow probabilities I'd developed for hierarchical federal structures. The exact language from my development notes, word for word, equation for equation. Except now the footer read, compiled by A. Caldwell, lead federal systems architect. Compiled, like she'd assembled a furniture kit instead of stealing 4 years of classified federal research. Every slide was mine, not inspired by my work, not a variation of my concepts, it was my work, digitally scrubbed of my identity and rebranded as Ashley Caldwell's revolutionary innovation. She'd even listed herself as principal inventor and federal compliance visionary. I minimized the presentation and opened my patent confirmation email. Status approved. Date, 6 weeks before termination. Inventor, Wesley J. Patterson. Patent classification, Federal Systems Architecture with Government. Contractor applications. Time to contact the federal team with smoking gun evidence. I called Investigator Reeves directly. "Ma'am, I have the presentation they're planning to show federal auditors next week. It's my patented system, word for word, with their names substituted for mine. Mr. Patterson, can you forward that presentation immediately? We need to review it before their scheduled audit. Already sending it now, along with my original development files showing creation dates and authorship metadata." A pause while she reviewed the materials. "Mr. Patterson, this is exactly what we needed. They're not just presenting stolen intellectual property. They're committing federal fraud by claiming original authorship of classified systems architecture. What happens next? Next, we attend their federal audit as observers and let them present stolen classified materials to government investigators. Then we arrest them for federal contract fraud." The audit was scheduled for Thursday morning at the federal building downtown. Caldwell Federal Systems would present their proprietary innovation to a panel of government compliance investigators, hoping to secure their next round of federal contracts worth millions. What they didn't know was that I'd been invited to attend, not as an observer, but as a federal witness with comprehensive documentation of intellectual property theft and security violations. Wednesday night, I laid out my good navy blue suit and organized my evidence folder one final time. Patent documents, development logs, security clearance records, email forensics, server access violations, 4 years of work backed by 24 years of federal expertise. I wasn't nervous. Nervous was for people who weren't sure of their facts. I had facts, documentation, and federal law on my side. Spencer and Ashley had family connections and stolen PowerPoint slides. In federal court, documentation beats connections every time. The federal investigation had uncovered something bigger than simple intellectual property theft. Ashley had forwarded classified federal compliance materials to unauthorized consultants, violating multiple security protocols. Spencer had documented a systematic cover-up, adding conspiracy charges to the original fraud. and Preston Caldwell, the CEO father, had signed off on federal contract submissions knowing they contained stolen intellectual property. What started as corporate nepotism had evolved into a federal case involving classified materials, security clearance violations, and systematic fraud against the United States government. Federal prosecutors don't negotiate when national security protocols are breached. They prosecute with the full weight of federal law, and the penalties for federal contract fraud start at millions and escalate quickly. Thursday morning would mark the end of the Caldwell family dynasty and the beginning of federal justice. I'd spent 24 years serving my country in uniform and as a civilian contractor. Tomorrow I'd watch that service finally get the recognition it deserved. Spencer thought he'd terminated a disloyal employee. Instead, he'd created a federal case that would destroy everything his family had built. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, the kind of Washington weather that makes everything feel like a federal courthouse. I wore my navy blue suit, the same color as the uniform I'd worn for 8 years before transitioning to civilian federal contracting. The federal building conference room was all business: polished walnut table, American flags, and a panel of government investigators who looked like they'd rather be prosecuting war crimes than listening to corporate presentations. Ashley sat at the presentation table with her laptop and that confident MBA smile, probably thinking this was just another corporate performance review. Spencer was beside her, checking his Apple Watch like he had somewhere more important to be than a federal compliance audit. Neither of them noticed me in the back row, sitting quietly with investigator Patricia Reeves and 2 federal prosecutors. The presentation started with the usual corporate theater: growth projections, innovation metrics, buzzwords like revolutionary and cutting edge and paradigm shifting. Ashley was in full performance mode, gesturing at slides like she was conducting a symphony she'd composed herself. Then she reached slide 12, Adaptive Federal Compliance Architecture, Our Proprietary Innovation, My System, My 4 Years of Nights and Weekends, My Solution to Federal Compliance Challenges that would have made most engineers quit in frustration. Ashley launched into her explanation, and I could immediately tell she'd memorized the presentation without understanding the underlying principles. This is a comprehensive structure that enables dynamic federal compliance monitoring across multiple regulatory nodes, she said, her voice rising at the end like she was asking a question instead of making a statement. It provides cascading logic through fallback hierarchies, so if one compliance layer encounters issues, the others automatically compensate. The room was politely attentive, but I could see the subtle skepticism from the technical experts on the panel. Ashley was using my words without understanding my logic, like someone reading Shakespeare in a language they didn't speak. That's when Investigator Reeves raised her hand. Ms. Caldwell, has this methodology been submitted for patent protection? Ashley glanced at Spencer with barely concealed panic. Spencer shrugged like a man who thought paperwork was beneath executive consideration. It's proprietary to our company, Spencer answered with corporate confidence. Internal development using company resources, but we're open to discussing licensing arrangements with preferred federal partners. Investigator Reeves didn't blink. That's not what I asked. I asked specifically whether this methodology has been patented. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Ashley's laptop screen suddenly seemed too bright. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again without producing sound. Spencer cleared his throat, his confidence evaporating. We're currently in the process of filing appropriate documentation with the USPTO. Because, Investigator Reeves continued, opening a thick folder on the table, the methodology you just presented matches exactly with USPTO Patent 11,239,847, filed by Wesley Patterson 6 weeks before his termination from your company. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Ashley's confident smile flickered like a dying light bulb. Investigator Reeves looked directly at me. Mr. Patterson, would you like to respond to this presentation? I stood up slowly, deliberately, with the quiet authority that comes from 24 years of federal service and 4 years of stolen work finally getting justice. I walked down the aisle and handed Investigator Reeves a black envelope containing my complete documentation package. Patent certificates, USPTO approval letters, development logs, security clearance records, server access violations, and email evidence of systematic theft. The patent is mine, I said simply. filed 6 weeks before my termination. Every methodology they just presented was developed by me over 4 years using my security clearance and my expertise. They stole classified federal compliance architecture and are presenting it as their own innovation. Investigator Reeves opened the envelope and reviewed the contents methodically. Patent confirmation showing sole authorship, documented timeline of development, evidence of unauthorized access, email trails proving intent to steal classified materials. She closed the folder and looked directly at Spencer. "Mr. Caldwell, your company has just presented stolen classified intellectual property to federal investigators as your own proprietary innovation. That constitutes federal contract fraud, violation of government contractor security regulations, and theft of classified federal systems architecture." Spencer's face went white. There must be some mistake. We didn't know." "The mistake," Investigator Reeves said with federal authority, "was thinking you could steal classified compliance architecture without consequences. Mr. Patterson's documentation is comprehensive and legally irrefutable." Ashley finally found her voice, but it came out as a desperate whisper. "But I developed this system. We developed it as a team. Wesley was just part of the development process." One of the federal prosecutors opened his laptop and turned the screen toward the room. There, displayed in official government formatting, was my patent filing. Patent 11,239,847, Systems and Methods for Adaptive Federal Multi-Tier Compliance Architecture. Inventor, Wesley J. Patterson. Status, approved by the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Furthermore, the prosecutor continued, "Our investigation has revealed that Ms. Caldwell accessed classified development materials without proper authorization, forwarded proprietary government contractor information to unauthorized external consultants, and participated in a documented conspiracy to conceal the theft of federal intellectual property." Spencer was gripping the table like it might provide some escape from federal prosecution. "What does this mean for our company?" "It means," the prosecutor said with the finality of federal law, "that Caldwell Federal Systems is facing immediate federal charges for contract fraud, a mandatory fine of $18.6 million for systematic violations of government contractor regulations, immediate suspension of all federal contracts pending criminal investigation, and potential individual criminal charges for theft of classified systems architecture." The number hit the room like a nuclear detonation. $18.6 million. Not a corporate slap on the wrist. A company-destroying penalty that would make headlines and end careers permanently. Ashley stared at her laptop like it might provide time travel back to before she'd stolen classified federal materials. Spencer looked like a man watching his family legacy dissolve in real time. I didn't gloat, didn't smile, just stood there as 24 years of federal service and 4 years of stolen innovation finally received the justice they deserved. 6 months later, the resolution exceeded every expectation. Caldwell Federal Systems paid the full $18.6 million federal fine and lost their government contracting license permanently. Spencer was terminated by his own board of directors. Ashley faced federal criminal charges and was permanently blacklisted from all government contracting work. My patent stood as definitive proof of original authorship, validated by federal investigation and court proceedings. The government not only vindicated my claims, but offered me an exclusive consulting contract to help other agencies identify and prevent similar contractor fraud. I founded Patterson Federal Compliance Consulting, building a business around the very system they'd tried to steal. The irony was perfect. Their theft had created the foundation for my independent success. Every morning I wake up knowing I protected federal compliance systems from people who thought family connections trumped federal law. Spencer learned that $18.6 million lesson the hard way. 24 years of documentation and proper procedures beat corporate nepotism every time. Sometimes the system works exactly like it's supposed to.